The long night clung to Aethelgard like a shroud woven from stardust and frozen despair. Kael, his breath misting in the frigid air, squinted against the faint, ethereal glow that haloed the jagged peaks in the distance. It was not the dawn, not yet. Just the aurora Aethelgardis, a haunting display of emerald and sapphire light, a constant reminder of the planet's lost glory. They called it the ghost of emerald ice. Beautiful, deadly, and forever out of reach. Once, Aethelgard had been a beacon. A blue-green jewel suspended in the inky blackness of the Xylos system, a vital refueling station and mining outpost for the sprawling Galactic Alliance. Ships, the size of frozen asteroids, would descend from the orbital tethers, their thrusters leaving fleeting rainbows on the icy horizon. They came for the Crillium, a rare mineral found deep within the Aethelgardian glaciers, crucial for powering advanced Alliance technologies. The Crillium boom had brought prosperity, albeit fleeting. Cities of shimmering crystal and reinforced polymers sprouted from the frozen plains, connected by networks of pressurized tubes and magnetic levitation rails. Thawing stations, massive complexes powered by geothermal energy, kept pockets of land fertile for hydroponics, providing sustenance for the miners, engineers, scientists, and their families who flocked to Aethelgard. It was all thanks to the Mining Covenant, a complex agreement between the Galactic Alliance and the Aethelgardian Consortium. The Covenant promised mutual benefit. The Alliance received a steady supply of Crillium, and Aethelgard would gain advanced technologies, infrastructure, and lasting security. A hollow promise, as Kael knew all too well. He, Kaelan, was a native. Born and raised in the glittering city of Glacia Prime, he had witnessed the tail end of Aethelgard's golden age. His father, a respected engineer, had worked on the thawing stations. Kael remembered summers spent exploring the crystal caverns beneath the city, the thrill of watching the towering excavators harvest the Crillium. He remembered the laughter, the music, the vibrant tapestry of cultures brought together by the allure of wealth and progress. He remembered the hope. Hope that, like the emerald ice, was now locked away, frozen in time. The prosperity of Aethelgard was built on a foundation of ice, both literally and figuratively. The Crillium veins were finite, and the Alliance's insatiable demand pushed the miners to ever more reckless depths. Safety protocols were ignored, warnings were dismissed, and corners were cut in the relentless pursuit of profit. Then came the Great Collapse, a chain reaction of geological instability, triggered by the rampant exploitation of the planet's geothermal vents. Ice sheets fractured, mountains crumbled, and cities were swallowed whole in avalanches of ice and debris. The network of thawing stations shattered, plunging the planet into a new ice age, even more unforgiving than before. The Alliance, predictably, abandoned Aethelgard to its fate. Citing the unforeseen consequences of the Mining Covenant, they severed all ties, leaving behind a planet choked with death and a population scrambling for survival. Life support systems failed, infrastructure crumbled, and the once harmonious community fractured into warring factions, desperate for dwindling resources. Kael, barely a teenager at the time, lost everything. His father was crushed in a tunnel collapse. His mother and younger sister were caught in a sudden blizzard, their life signs fading out on his comms as the howling winds swallowed their cries. He had clung to their memory with all his might, until now almost nothing but a whisper. In the aftermath, Kael scavenged, adapted, and hardened. He learned to navigate the treacherous landscape, to hunt the mutated, bioluminescent creatures that roamed the frozen wastes. He became skilled at repairing damaged technology, piecing together scraps of equipment to survive. He became known as the Ghost of the Ice, a solitary figure haunting the ruins of Aethelgard. Now, he continued down into the crevice, the memory of his family pushing him. The initial tremors were subtle, dismissed as aftershocks from the deep mining operations that clawed at Aethelgard's crust. Then came the grinding. A low, guttural groan that resonated through the ice plains, shaking the crystal spires of Glacia Prime and rattling the bones in Kael's young body. His father, Elian, a supervisor at Thawing Station Delta 7, had tried to reassure him. "Just a bit of tectonic shifting, Kaelan," he'd said, his voice echoing from his helmet. Nothing to worry about. These ice cities are built to withstand anything. Elian was wrong. The first sign of real trouble wasn't an earthquake, but the sky. It fractured. Or, at least, that's how it appeared to Kael. The aurora Aethelgardis, usually a shimmering curtain of emerald and sapphire, began to flicker erratically, its colors shifting and distorting. Then, cracks, thin and blood-red, appeared, snaking across the celestial canvas like veins in a dying heart. The Great Collapse, as it became known in hushed whispers and terrified screams, was not merely a geological event. It was a cascade of failures, a catastrophic unraveling of everything that had been built on Aethelgard. The geothermal vents, destabilized by years of exploitation, erupted. Explosions of superheated steam tore through the ice, creating chasms that swallowed entire districts of Glacia Prime. The thawing stations, designed to maintain a delicate balance, went haywire, flooding sections of the city with scalding water or plunging them into absolute zero. The pressurized tubes connecting the cities ruptured, spewing out vital atmosphere into the frigid void. But worse than the geological chaos was the societal collapse. The mining covenant, once the bedrock of Aethelgard's prosperity, turned into a death warrant. With resources dwindling and escape impossible for most, the carefully constructed veneer of civilization shattered. The Galactic Alliance, hundreds of light-years away, declared Aethelgard a lost cause. They sealed the orbital tethers, leaving behind millions of people to perish. The few remaining ships, commandeered by desperate factions, fought tooth and nail for the limited access to the sky. Law enforcement disappeared, replaced by gangs preying on the weak. Food reserves were looted, and the carefully managed hydroponic systems were destroyed in the ensuing riots. The most basic tenets of civilization, trust, cooperation, empathy, dissolved like snowflakes on a plasma torch. Even faith faltered. The Order of the Eternal Flame, the dominant religious sect on Aethelgard, preached that the Crillium held the key to spiritual enlightenment. When the Great Collapse struck, many lost their faith, their leaders unable to explain why the Eternal Flame had failed to protect them. The temples were abandoned, replaced by makeshift bunkers and strongholds. Kael witnessed the disintegration firsthand. He was working as an apprentice mechanic in the lower districts of Glacia Prime when the first tremors struck. His father, frantically trying to maintain the power grid, ordered him to get his mother and sister to the emergency shelters. That was the last time he saw Elian. He navigated the chaotic streets, dodging falling debris and desperate looters. He reached his family's apartment just as the emergency sirens began to wail. His mother Anya, a botanist who had always found beauty in the most desolate landscapes, was packing a small bag with dried rations and a few treasured keepsakes. His younger sister, Lyra, a bright-eyed child with a talent for music, clung to his leg, her face streaked with tears. The emergency shelter was a nightmare. Thousands of people crammed into a claustrophobic space, the air thick with the smell of sweat and fear. There were whispers of rationing, of power failures, of the Alliance abandoning them. Anya, always the pragmatist, kept Kael and Lyra close, sharing their meager rations and trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Then came the lulls, where some semblance of society remained. People would help each other, and some would even play music. Lyra and Kael were known for their ability to play songs of their past, and make the others not afraid. But then, one of the ice caves that supplied water to the city collapsed. The city began to fall silent as people's hope was quickly replaced by panic. Anya, using her knowledge of plants and water, began to explore the caves in hopes of finding a way to save people. The end came swiftly. A section of the glacier above the shelter fractured, sending a torrent of ice and snow crashing down upon them. The shelter, built to withstand earthquakes, was no match for the sheer force of the avalanche. A wave of ice and snow engulfed them, burying the shelter and its inhabitants alive. Kael, thrown clear by the impact, watched in horror as the avalanche swallowed his mother and sister. He clawed at the ice, desperate to reach them, but it was futile. Their life signs flickered on his comms and then went dark. He was alone. In the days that followed, Kael wandered the ruins, haunted by the ghosts of his family, and the memories of a life that was no more. He scavenged for scraps, fought off scavengers and beasts, and gradually hardened himself against the pain. He became a ghost himself, a silent figure roaming the frozen wasteland, driven by a primal instinct to survive, but with little hope left in his heart. The memory of the great collapse would forever be etched into Kael's soul. A reminder of the fragility of civilization, the ruthlessness of nature, and the enduring power of loss. Now all of that will be tested with the alien woman that is in his life. Kael's survival wasn't just luck, it was a testament to his resourcefulness, his relentless adaptability, and a skill set honed by necessity. He wasn't a soldier, a scientist, or a leader. He was a mechanic, a scavenger, a ghost in the machine, haunting the icy veins of a dying world. His most valuable asset wasn't a weapon, though he carried one. It was his mind, his ability to understand how things worked, how they broke, and how they could be made to work again, even with the most limited resources. The skills his father had taught him, the principles of engineering and thermodynamics, were now more precious than any Crillium crystal. He could coax sputtering generators back to life, reroute power through tangled conduits, and salvage precious components from the wreckage of pre-collapse technology. His workshop, deep within a hidden alcove of the bear's den, was a testament to his ingenuity, a chaotic collection of wires, gears, plasma torches, and salvage tools, all illuminated by the flickering glow of repurposed energy cells. The secret to surviving on Aethelgard, Kael had learned, wasn't just about staying warm, it was about managing heat. He knew the subtle shifts in the permafrost, the location of the geothermal vents, and the most efficient ways to capture and channel that energy for heating, cooking, and powering his equipment. He could identify the faintest shimmer of geothermal radiation, the subtle signs that indicated a potential source of warmth. But his most crucial tool was his protective suit. It was a patchwork creation, assembled from scavenged components and reinforced with salvaged polymers. The original suit had belonged to an Alliance survey team, a high-tech marvel designed to withstand the extreme conditions of Aethelgard. Kael had painstakingly repaired and modified it over the years, adding layers of insulation, enhancing its camouflage capabilities, and installing a sophisticated toxin filtration system. The suit wasn't just protection, it was an extension of himself. He could feel the temperature fluctuations in the environment, the subtle shifts in wind direction, the pressure changes that heralded an impending storm. The camouflage system allowed him to blend seamlessly into the icy landscape, making him nearly invisible to both human and animal predators. The filtration system, vital for surviving in a world polluted by volcanic gases and industrial waste, was a constant hum against his ears, a reminder of the toxic reality outside. But his suit couldn't protect him from the icy grip of his memories. Despite his hardened exterior, Kael was haunted by the ghosts of his past. In his dreams, he would relive the great collapse, seeing the icy walls closing in, hearing the cries of his family as they were swallowed by the avalanche. He would wake up gasping for breath, his body drenched in cold sweat, the phantom weight of grief pressing down on him. Sometimes, he would find himself staring into the aurora-lit sky, wondering if Anya and Lyra were somehow watching over him. Were they waiting for him in some ethereal afterlife, or had they simply ceased to exist, their lives extinguished like a flickering candle? The uncertainty tormented him, driving him to question the very value of his survival. Was he simply delaying the inevitable, prolonging his own suffering in a world that had no place for hope? He would often fall into these moods for days at a time, but his purpose wouldn't let him stay down for too long. He had to survive, he knew he had to. His survival wasn't driven by any grand ambition or sense of purpose. It was a primal instinct, a deep-seated refusal to surrender to the forces that had taken everything from him. Sometimes, when he was alone in the vast emptiness of the wasteland, he would stare into his own reflection in a sheet of ice and wonder if he was truly alive, or just a walking corpse, animated by grief and fueled by a stubborn refusal to die. The line between survival and mere existence had blurred long ago. He was a master of his craft, a survivor in a world designed to kill. But beneath the icy shell, Kael remained a broken man, haunted by the ghosts of his past and wrestling with the burden of his survival. He was a tapestry of harsh adaptation, ingenuity and resilience, and brokenness. All those aspects would soon be challenged by one very unlikely arrival. The SOS crackled to life on Kael's salvaged comms unit, a ragged, distorted whisper slicing through the monotonous hum of the geothermal generator in his iced Denver. For months the comms had been silent, a testament to Aethelgard's isolation, a cold, dead line to a galaxy that had abandoned it. He nearly dismissed the signal as interference, a stray echo bouncing off the ionosphere. But something in the fragmented syllables, a desperate urgency, snagged his attention. He adjusted the gain, his fingers calloused and scarred from years of manipulating ancient technology. The language was alien, a guttural mix of clicks and whistles that sounded like wind chimes in a blizzard. But even without understanding the words, Kael could sense the fear, the desperation clinging to the edges of the signal. The source was traced to the Wailing Ridge, a desolate range that held a deep history with the people of Aethelgard. He had a choice: ignore the plea, seal himself back into the relative safety of the Hangbang, and continue his solitary existence. Or venture out into the heart of the worst region, face untold dangers, and risk his life for someone he didn't know, speaking a language he didn't understand. The logical part of Kael's brain screamed at him to stay put. Resources were scarce, the journey would be treacherous, and the odds of finding anyone alive, let alone rescuing them, were astronomically low. Every instinct honed by years of survival told him that this was a fool's errand, a reckless gamble that could cost him everything. But the echoes of his past were louder now. He couldn't get the images of his family leaving from his head. The ghost of the lost rescue ship, a tragedy that still weighed on Kael. The voices of his mother and sister, fading into the blizzard winds, pleading for help that never came. He knew what it felt like to be abandoned, to be left to die in the cold. The memory burned like frostbite on his soul. He thought of Anya, his wife, always willing to help those in need, even when it meant risking her own life. Before the collapse, Anya was an engineer with a bright future ahead. He thought to himself, what would she do? He also knew the dangers of the Wailing Ridge. The blizzards could whip up in minutes, reducing visibility to near zero and burying travelers beneath layers of unforgiving ice. The terrain was treacherous, riddled with hidden crevasses and unstable ice formations. Then there were the creatures, mutated ice scavengers drawn to the scent of blood and fear. Answering the call would be suicide. It would be just like his family who died exploring these ridges. Yet the signal continued, a faint, desperate pulse against the relentless silence of Aethelgard. As his finger hovered over the power switch, another vivid image flashed through Kael's mind: his younger sister, Lyra, her bright eyes wide with terror as the avalanche roared down upon them. Could he live with himself if he ignored another cry for help, knowing that someone else might be facing the same agonizing fate? It was more than curiosity. It was a desperate need to prove that something good could still come from this desolate world. That even in the face of unimaginable loss, compassion could still exist, that humanity wasn't entirely extinguished on Aethelgard. For a time, the past pulled him. For another, the fear, but the idea to help this alien woman pulled the young Kael out. It was a very long and agonizing decision to make. Finally, as the wind howled and the aurora danced a mocking jig across the sky, Kael made a decision. He let out a heavy sigh, he flipped the power switch. A red light flared on the comms unit, confirming the signal was live. He started the generator and gave power to the rover. He prepared for the most crucial journey in his life. The Wailing Ridge lived up to its name. The wind shrieked like tortured spirits as Kael navigated the blizzard, the landscape a blinding swirl of white. His modified snow rover, a hulking machine of scavenged parts, struggled against the icy gusts, its treads barely gripping the treacherous terrain. The comms unit, still locked onto the distress signal, led him toward an area of distorted energy readings where the rescue ship lay. The ship was a disaster, more of an ice sculpture than a vessel. A chunk of mountain, dislodged by the Great Collapse, had taken a direct hit, shearing off a section of the hull and burying the rest in a prison of ice and rock. Cautiously, Kael secured his rover behind a ridge of ice. His suit's environmental seals hissed as he depressurized the cockpit, the frigid air biting at his exposed skin as he donned his helmet. Every step was a calculated risk, the wind threatening to send him tumbling into a hidden crevasse. He approached the wreckage slowly, his pulse rifle raised, scanning for any sign of movement. The interior of the ship was a twisted labyrinth of metal and ice. Wires hung like frozen veins, sparks intermittently showering from severed power conduits. The air was thick with the metallic tang of ozone and the cloying scent of something organic. Kael activated his helmet's infrared scanner. The images flickered across his visor, outlining the twisted shapes of the wreckage, highlighting pockets of heat, and revealing a figure. It was wedged deep within a section of the ship that had somehow remained relatively intact, pinned beneath a collapsed support beam. A human would have been crushed instantly. This figure, however, was different. Her form was partially obscured by debris, but enough was visible to tell Kael that this was not a native of Aethelgard, nor was it a human from any colony or ship he had ever known. Her skin was an unusual shade of blue, a deep, almost iridescent cerulean that seemed to absorb the faint light. Hair of pink cascaded from under the damaged envirosuit. There were markings, dark and almost tribal in appearance, etched in her face. His gaze settled on her eyes. They were violet and piercing. The suit she wore, or what remained of it, was unlike anything Kael had ever seen. It was sleeker, more streamlined than the bulky Alliance models, crafted from materials that shimmered and shifted colors with the changing light. A portion of the helmet was gone, ripped away by the impact, revealing the extent of her injuries. She was covered in wounds and scars. Her left arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, pinned beneath the support beam. A jagged gash ran across her forehead, a trickle of bioluminescent fluid, xylem blood staining her skin. What struck Kael most was her posture. Despite the obvious pain and the near impossible circumstances, Lumina still held herself with a certain dignity, an air of defiance that refused to be extinguished. One hand, free from the debris, clenched into a fist, knuckles white against her blue skin. The other reached, almost pleadingly, to the sky. As Kael approached, the woman's violet eyes flickered open. They were luminous, filled with a pain and something that seemed like despair. Kael's initial suspicion gave way to a surge of compassion. He began speaking in his language and offering her gestures of help. Now, he had a new objective. He needed to help save this woman, and he knew he had to do everything he could. Her eyes were pleading him to, as they told him it was just what she wanted to tell him. She did not seem like someone bad. This was when he would make his decision, now, at this moment. His hand hovered in anticipation over his gun, ready to shoot at any time. The fate of both of them, laid before them, now in this chamber of death and broken technology.